Are you working on your author career but struggling to get that first book published? Does the goal of being an author seem too lofty? Or thoughts of having multiple books and making a full-time living are as fantastical as living in Cinderella's castle? Welcome to Discovered Wordsmiths, a podcast where aspiring authors can be heard. Join Stephen Schneider as he finds and talks to authors you may not know, but authors that have gotten their foot on the author career path. Hear what they've done to get there and where they want to go now. Settle back. It's time for a bit of inspiration and advice. Come listen to today's Discovered Wordsmith.
But before we talk about our topic, what are some things, and this may be completely unique because of going from one language to another, what are some things you've learned about writing that you're doing different than you did when you first started?
Okay, yeah. So in the beginning, in my school years, there was no creative writing class. There was just German language arts in the way traditionally told. You read classics. Now, I can tell you, but from the fifth grade on until my end of my high school, I just had a D in German, right? So I was not like, obviously, oh, that's going to be the writer. I struggled. I wrote essays, like 16 essays in a row over 2 years with D's. I felt like my name was the D, like, oh, Thorsten, D, so I could write whatever I wanted. So I didn't learn a lot about that. I did read a lot, but I didn't analyze it. Okay. And then when I was in Victoria, that was like 2000 around, I came across literally the first time about the Odyssey, like in the way of the structure, the way of the hero. Oh, are you still there?
Yeah.
And so that was something that I then followed up with, and then read books a different way as well. And that's why I say, this is something I learned in Canada. I learned that in the English language. Unfortunately, I wasn't exposed to that in Germany for whatever reason. I wasn't repelled to secondary language literature. I even bought myself secondary literature, like what the students read in university. But I don't know. It was too academic. And although I went to university, I studied something else and I didn't finish. So I got sidetracked with journalism, if you're into words and culture, and then life took a different path. So that is something I learned, that structural.
Well, that's the thing with English, German language classes. That, like you said, that's the student that's going to be the writer. It's not always the A+ English kid that, it's one thing to learn the stuff to take a test and one thing to read the books, and that it's a whole nother thing to write a story. And they say it so often that grammar, typos, commas, that stuff can all be fixed and learned and put in there, but you have to have a soul for writing a story. And if you don't have a good story, the other stuff doesn't matter. Nobody's going to read a book and say, wow, the grammar was perfect and all the commas were in the right place. The story kind of sucked. You should read this. They don't do that. So, it's good to learn that. Plus, now we have so many tools to help catch all the little errors. So, yes, I'm telling all the kids, learn your language, German, English, whatever, learn it, do good in the classes, but don't feel like, oh, I could never write because I didn't do well.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think nowadays it's also in Germany more common that you can show what you read privately at home. And that was something nobody ever asks me. What are you reading? What are you reading? Right. I read The Godfather with 15 years,
Okay.
And then you're not going back to something else. Right. That's literature. Yeah. So,
right. And I find that a lot too. Authors, I've talked to a few authors that say, oh, I don't like to read. I just want to write. Well, you have, and you said it, you have to read. And most authors that seem to stick with it, they're not reading at their grade or age level. They're always reading, oh, I was 9 years old and I read it,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
So all the time. Um, Thorsten, when you're writing, what software and services do you use?
So I'm really, it was funny. I started on a typewriter, right? Like I'm a little old. But then I moved to the computer, and then I had like, I think for a few months, I started my first book in Word. But then a friend of mine said he worked already with homepage and stuff back then in the early 90s. And he said, go open office. And then I resisted, and then I did it because like, yeah, it didn't crash and I could convert to PDF right away. So I generally, as with the book that I just wrote, I used OpenOffice as a writing tool. Um, in German, I also had a professional writing software that it integrates the that was called. Now I have to think. What was it? Dragon, right? No, Dragon is a speech recognition.
Right.
Yeah, I use speech recognition too, by the way.
Okay.
Like, um, it doesn't make it faster for me. I just can lie down, I can stand, I can walk around. It just makes me more mobile, but I don't write a novel faster. So I do speech recognition. Um, and with as English software, what is more interested is like I used Writing Aid after a couple of researches. I was like, yeah, like with my grammar, sometimes I'm off with something, and I felt like that helped me a good way. I could, it's like and some structural stuff, and also what I do, I because I don't want to say I'm insecure about I'm just careful with my English language when I write. I don't want to uh, fall in the trap of the usual repetitions that exist in German as well, right? Like you can fall into the same traps or different traps. So what I did in the beginning, like 5 years ago, I was Writing Aid actually, and I did this 30 years ago in German as well, or 25 years ago in German as well. I took my 10 favorite books and I spoke 20 pages into the program and analyzed it. And those analysis I keep, and then I compare them to mine. And then I see if there's something totally off of something that I like. So it was a lot of editing or a lot of tweaking. And sometimes you're surprised, hey, I'm pretty much dead on there. What, sentence length and those
Right.
things, right?
Right. Nice.
It's a guidance, right? Depending
Right.
like what point of view and narration voice, of course, is it dialogue laden or not? But in general, I find it helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I've got Pro Writing Aid. I use it all the time. And I think some people miss the point. Some people are like, oh, I won't rely on that to fix my grammar and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but it teaches me a lot. If I go through, I don't just say fix it all and I'm done. You go through and you read it and why did they say it was wrong? Why should you change this? And you start learning and your writing improves naturally. It's a great
Yes.
learning tool.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and last but not least, it's always our decision. Like, do I take it, or is that a synchronicity of a character to speak
Yeah.
that way, or whatever, right? Like,
Yeah. And I've done that with my editor also a couple times, oh, you should change this and rearrange it. And I'm like, yeah, well, that sounds very proper way to say it, but that's not what I want my character to say,
yeah,
and that's
exactly.
what it
Yeah,
mostly is what characters are saying there quite often. And I also like that you use OpenOffice. I think you're the first other author that has used that. I don't use it all the time, but I've told people about it. They're like, "Oh, I don't know. I can't afford Word." Well, go try OpenOffice. It's
yeah,
free.
yeah. And from when I talk to my colleagues, I now try to think when it crashed on me. Recently, we have a different printer, and with the Wi-Fi printing, there seems to be a hiccup, but it's not the Open Office problem.
Right.
I was like that, yeah, and it was for free all the time, and yeah, they had the PDF button in there way before Word. I think Word has it now too.
Yeah. They do have it, but that's one of the reasons I got OpenOffice because I could write in Word, import it into OpenOffice, and make it a
Yeah,
PDF, and I didn't have to buy the whatever
yeah,
extra.
yeah, yeah.
So, okay, so what? Let's talk a little bit about writing in German and English. And you said you don't write in German too much anymore. But did did you find when you were writing in German, everybody has certain things that are difficult for them or certain problems. Did you find that you had the same things you were doing in English, or is it completely different things that you ended up uh, changing quite often or doing different?
Um, I think the greatest hindrance for me as a storyteller is that I don't have the pool of cultural references in in the second language.
Okay.
So you grew up with different or the same shows, but the characters are named different. When you crack a joke with your buddy, then he understands it because it's a
Right.
reference. I don't have that, and I think I don't have a possibility to catch up with that because that's just like 10 years or 15 years of your childhood, right? For
Right.
example. um, so I just have to accept that that is not possible, but or to say I would not pretend necessarily creating a character that is, let's say, a professor of English language arts. I think I can pull that off. I can pull off a futuristic novel because they could speak in any way almost,
Right.
right? The language evolves. I definitely trust myself in writing young adult fiction in English as well. Like because I have kids that grew up here, I hear them talk and all that, and that is what the book with Blessing Musariri, my Zimbabwean colleague, is about. Um, so, and in German, I must say, like my, the other question that goes there, what is with writer's block? And for me, it's almost like if you give me time and a shelter and like some food, I don't have a writer's block. Then it's like I have time to write and place to write, and the sky was a limit in German. Um, if there was, let's say, a job, let's say the one is a broker, right? I'm not a broker, but then I do research for half a year. I did even online broking with money to just see how it feels and to know the concepts and the lingo, and I could incorporate that in my German base. And like I say, certain things I wouldn't attempt in English. I just wouldn't. Maybe with a help then that I say like I hire an editor that has that. Could you get that lingo there? But that is all to. There are so many ideas out there. I don't have to write from the point of view of an English professor.
Right. Okay.
So,
So when you first started writing in English,
hmm.
did you find yourself having to? Okay, let me back up. Did it take you longer to write in English when you first started than it does now? And did you find yourself writing, I guess, in a more German manner with the language, uh, and then fixing it, or how did that process go?
Yeah, that would be, I think, a danger if I would be thrown in the cold water, right? But it is not. So I speak with my wife English, right? And we do this since 22 years. We are married, so so since quite a while, and so I think over 15 years, if you use it as a daily language, and we watch the movies together, whatever happens in the household, being when we were living in Germany or in Canada, was in English. So I had quite a run up, and I almost compare that to I started out where I was in German in my language when I was 18, 19, and I got interested, and I come from a household, uh, there was no academics, so it was blue collar German. And I just found out that whenever I heard somebody talk a little bit with a twist, like a comedian or whatever, right? Or some teachers had that. And I was like, I like that. Why do I like that? And I like reading books. And I was just curious, drawn to the language. Um, and I said here already, like, okay, if I'm now in my English language where I was when I was 18, let's say, then give me another 5 years of study, of personal study, and and this one year, the last year, I don't even know how to count that, right? I could just lean back and work with the English language. And that was a boost that I think every immigrant should get. Honestly, like thinking about it, if English is your second language and you have to move, or in any other country, they should just give you $1,000 and lean back, read books, listen to radio, write something, and you will be in 1 year speak that language, whatever that Spanish or whatever that is. I think that happened now to me. That's also how I just put that in the final report. That is, it's a great thing beyond creating something.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does your wife just speak English, or does she come from the area that speaks French also?
She is here from Alberta, from Calgary originally, and but she moved to Quebec, that area in Canada, the province, and worked there. I think for half a year. She also worked in the northern states as well, and then she moved to France for a year. So she speaks French some, right? And then she learned the German. Poor
Wow.
Marcia, my wife. She learned the German with the kids. They go to school, they come home, and or like even in the first when you're toddler, right? Like you babble a couple of words that they pick up from me, from the grandparents, from the neighbors, right? So Marcia, my wife, she learned that way German, right? It just
Wow.
bubbled out with the kids.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah.
So
So
you're multilingual, like multiple language, and your kids probably pick up a little from all of that. That's pretty cool.
yeah, that was quite wild. So our oldest was born in Canada, and he is bilingual. The second one is also bilingual, although he's stuck. We moved here when he was 12. So he even says, like, my German is the German of a 12-year-old, and he's not off with that. And the youngest, he was 6 when we moved here. He just spoke German to Marcia and to me, to everybody. He never spoke English. He could understand everything, but he never responded in English. We moved here, and had a paid writer's residency in the Black Forest area in Germany, and I had to stay there for a month. That was a little jumbo mambo. So I had to leave the family here in Canada, and I was there. I came back after 4 months. He didn't respond in German to me anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I just owe him. That's it.
Yeah. I think that would be cool to hear the different languages. My grandparents were from Hungary,
Oh
and they
yeah.
spoke German quite a bit, and especially when they get mad and argue.
I do that
So,
too. That's a German that the little guy knows.
right, yeah. So, Thorsten, you said you don't translate your own books. Have you tried translating your own books or writing the same story in the
Yeah.
two languages?
Yeah, it's funny. It just like I think I stopped after a one page. It's like then you start translating, and it's then that is different translating than the other way around. I translated a book from English to German. That was a Peace Nobel Prize winner, Bishop Desmond Tutu's book. So
Okay.
I'm the translator. I translated that and was published in Germany, right? But I translated into my first language. Total different story. And once I attempted the reverse because I thought, oh, well, okay, well, English is not so bad. But it's like, no, it's like, it is definitely not the same. And I started my first, of course, okay, I grew up I love music. You mentioned like songwriting is my hobby, right? So I listen to music. I love lyrics, right? So I read the lyrics of albums and stuff. So, and then it happened. So my English was somewhere. And then my first holiday that I as a young lad, 18-year-old did was I grabbed my backpack. I want to go to Ireland. I love Irish music. I love the Pokes. I love this Guinness. I wanted to go there. So I went there, and they do have that pub culture where people go up and make music and join and jam, and sometimes somebody has a poem. And I was sitting there in a pub and I wrote something down in English, and the guy saw it and basically pushed me to the stage. And I was like, oh, I'm actually just, and it was well received, nice people, right? There were probably tons of mistakes in there, but they had a blast, right? And the night is legendary. So, but I kept writing short things in English, like songs. I wrote songs for the last 25 years about in English. So, and then the first novel was with a native speaker, and now the second one is just me. So it's
Okay.
gradually, right? It's very slow. Yeah.
Okay. And your books that have been translated, have you read them afterwards? And did you find like, oh my gosh, that's not how I would have translated it, or I don't agree with that, or problems?
Yeah, being a translator myself into German, the first thing that I told the people that were interested in translating it, please, you have all the freedom. Do it, let yourself, do, definitely don't cling to try to translate something, a metaphor that doesn't work in English, right? There are certain, I also have cultural references that are not translatable. You have to use something else then, how people translate lyric. I have no idea, by the way, when it's experimental lyric, how you translate them from one language to another. I have no idea. So,
Right.
but yeah, and then I not only read it in the with my 3 Audible books, I also listened to them again, and that was just a cherry on top. Basically, that was like, oh my, this is this. It sounds authentic. It doesn't sound like translated. It's really, really like they did a good job. The one, yeah. So I had
Nice.
different translators for all.
And how long did the whole process take to start writing from German and then into English? Or is it
Yeah,
still ongoing?
yeah. I want to say like it's always morphing. Otherwise, if it's not a challenge anymore, I think I would get bored. So that is, I want to challenge myself. And since it's a long time coming, so we're talking from the early '90s. Where it's like I started on that first trip to Ireland. I also read my first English novel in the original, which happened to be On the Road by Jack Kerouac.
Okay.
And yeah, so that was linguistically a little bit outdated. I didn't even know, right? That was how they talked in the '60s, right? Like jalopy, and it's like, yeah, I remember that word. I used it in Ireland. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, it's in the novel, right? And like, this is from 60 something.
Right, right.
They always had a, yeah. And so it's like I said, I think if it would be difficult if I would just move, let's say, to Canada. I'm in after high school, and then I want to write a novel 2 years later. That is different than coming this long way, being married, being involved in language, and living now in Canada for more than 10 years in total, like 11 or 12 years. Um, that I think helps. And if people now say like, well, he's not, his my talking or my vocabulary while talking is not quite where it could be. Yes, my German was higher maybe, but especially in the beginning, um, I always say writing is the right speed for my expression. Otherwise, I would be on stage and doing TED talks. It's like, so I need,
So I know English language is like a whole big mishmash, and it's like one rule doesn't apply here, blah blah. Did you find anything very specific that drove you crazy with the English language because it was so messed up compared to what you were used to?
uh, my just because I was in the garden and I do like some, home improvement and stuff, I don't know. A 2x4 is not a 2x4. It's 1.5. And I thought the guy joked at me. I was like, yeah, I know I'm not from here, but, I want to have a 2x4. You know. Anyway, but that's like a practical one. The other thing is that, of course, first I thought, English is English, but English is like in Germany, for example, different areas have different dialects. And if there would be no High German, a Northern German would not understand a Southern German, for example. If there would be no High German, there would be toasts. That's how different they are. So I learned my speaking English actually in Ireland. After being there once, I went there 3, 4 times, right? Before I went anywhere else in an English country. So when I came to Canada, I was using Jumper and He's a Good Crack. And the guys in Vancouver said, you don't say crack here. You just don't. So these things are the ones where it's like, oh, please, I learn a new word and I'm like, yay, I know a new word. Or also nice, I like to read newspaper. The Globe and Mail is a big newspaper here in Canada, and they have a section called even Zeitgeist. I'm like, German word. I can use it everywhere. So I go to a pub in the prairies. I'm like, so yeah, the side guy's like, what? So the classic sentence from Marcia, my wife, is like, "Yeah, you don't. Nobody knows that here in the prairies, so just skip that word." I'm like, "Oh,
That's
so
hilarious. That
yeah,
that I just picture your life from German to Canada with the kids and the languages and that. I picture that as a comedy show on TV. I can see
yes,
the situations. I'm not picking on your life. I'm just
no,
saying there's so much room for that situational comedy to be humorous to watch. I think you should try and write that. Based on real events.
maybe I should. That's a plan B. Yeah,
There
no,
you go.
it, I always say that. Yeah, it wasn't boring. Let's put it this way: it wasn't boring.
I can't imagine, trying to learn a whole new language now. It's just my brain doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't work like that. I've had such a hard time when I was in school. So I just never really tried after that. So I can't even
Yeah,
imagine doing that.
yeah, no, and I myself, I wasn't encouraged by my school career, right? It was the genuine interest in the Irish culture, for example, and then being reinforced, being there, um, having a time of my life, and then of course you go back there, and then you meet. I met a friend Fergal in Cologne, actually, Cologne, Germany. He was working there, and then we stayed at his place in Dublin over Christmas, and yeah, and then reading the first novels, and especially, and that was a major point, especially being in a pub, for example, and you can hold up a conversation and the people don't phase out or whatever, and they're like, no man, you know a second language, that's awesome, tell more, and you feel encouraged. That's nice. That this
Yeah.
is being very, very, very nice. And I this was the one where it propelled me to like, oh, maybe I can do better. I remember exactly, now that we're talking about it, there was a German vocabulary book, and the smart one was, they said it was pretty thin. It was like, let's say, 80 pages. And they said, if you know all the words on these 80 pages, that is 75% of all conversations. And that was a great concept for me. Instead of having here the Britannica and say, that's English. I'm like, oh,
Right.
okay, then you give up, right? But knowing 75% of conversations, I had a goal. And they were right with this book. I wish I would know actually the book. This should exist for every language, where it's like, here, that's all. You can hold up a conversation in a bakery, and then you can take it from there. Right?
Nice. Yeah, and I agree with that. They're always being editors and stuff, don't use the big flowery language if you don't have to, and
Yeah.
make it all work. And I know I just recently discovered Lee Child as an author that I enjoy. He writes the Reacher books, and I'm not a big thriller reader. It's just not my genre, but I liked the Amazon TV show, so I said, okay, I'm going to read the book. And I started reading. I'm like, his style is so different. It's most of his sentences are 7 words or less, and
Mhm.
there's no word like more than like 4 or 5 letters. And it's just very straightforward and simple, but kept me engaged. So yeah, that's how people are. You're right.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned it in the book. I remember my first year in Canada, in Calgary. So I wasn't allowed to work, so I had little savings when Marcia went to work, my wife, right? But we weren't married at the time. So she went to work, and I was like, yeah, I, want to start, getting better with English. I read stuff. And then I found the TV show really famous Friends. And I watched that a couple of times, and the art in Friends, and I really say that, is like having a very small vocabulary, telling complex stories where people follow, and that many people liked it. But I think it was also the accessibility for people as a second language to see people having daily conversations versus, and I did this with the British TV shows, and their vocabulary was way higher. Uh, and I think that I admire that ability, like basically what you just said, in especially, I think especially in American culture or North American culture, where there is a lot of immigration.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Well, Thorsten, it's been a great conversation. I love talking to you all about German and the language. I thank you very much. Before we go, though, do you have any last minute advice for new authors?
For new authors. Um, so when I made a conscious decision at one point in my early 20s, where I said like, okay, I want to work, I want a job to buy myself time to write, and then I can write what I want. I probably never will be able to live of it and to make a living, but I can write what I need to write and what I want to write. And I think that is the best. That was one of my best decisions because like for 10 years it happened and now it doesn't, but I still can write what I need and what I want. And I'm not a hired gun.
Nice. Okay, great. Well, Thorsten, thank you for taking some time and chatting today. It's been great having you on. Enjoy your nice weather finally.
I will.
Thank you for listening to Discovered Wordsmiths. Come back next week and listen to another author discuss the road they've traveled, and maybe, sometime in the near future, it might be you.